There we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, friends. This meeting is being recorded. Welcome to another fine webinar session at College Essay Guy. I'm Ethan, your host, your primary host. My co-pilot here is Tom Campbell. You'll meet Tom in just a second. We're talking personal statements, and we're talking about how to write a great one. And because it's time, 'tis the season, friends. Next week, we've got a part two where we're going to talk about not just the personal statement, but we're going to zoom back and talk about all the other elements of the written parts of your application, including your activities list and your additional info section. And what even is that? And your supplemental essays. Yes, the session's being recorded. For those of you curious, we'll send it in a follow-up email. We're not going to share the slides, FYI. Captions at the bottom of your screen. We've got the Q&A feature turned on for this webinar, and Tom is going to be standing by in the chat to answer your questions. So you're getting a 2-for-1 today. And we're going to share a live session survey poll here to just get to know y'all a little bit better. So stay tuned for that. Here's me. Here's some, if you've never met me before, here are some places where I've spent some time. I've written some books, and I've been doing this pretty much since 2003. Last year at College Essay Guy was our biggest year in terms of folks coming to the website, which we're really proud of. And I'll tell you more about College Essay Guy in just a little bit. But if you really knew me, you'd know that I moved around a lot as a kid and had to learn how to become friends with people really fast. And so I had to develop the superpower of asking deep questions, but the right questions that would help me get closer to people. And I think that really informed my work, the work that you'll experience today if you've never met me. Tom, what about you?
So my bio is not as fun. I don't have anything about free throw shooting in here, but just want to give you a sense from where I'm coming from, why I'm here on the screen with you today. So for those of you who haven't done any prior College Essay Guy webinars or sessions, my name's Tom Campbell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. Here's a little bit about my professional background. So prior to working at College Essay Guy, where I've been working in a couple different capacities for the past 2 years. I worked in college admissions primarily for the bulk of my career at my alma mater, Holy Cross, which is in Massachusetts, and then also Pomona College, which is one of the Claremont colleges in Southern California. So the world of highly selective college admissions is something that I eat, sleep, and breathe and did for many years, having read thousands of applications. So that's definitely the perspective that I like to bring to these sessions. So please do use the Q&A box as Ethan's going along with the presentation. That's where I'm going to be hanging out today. So any questions you have around the admission process, essays, or otherwise, I'm happy to answer them, both from my perspective, having worked in admissions, but also having worked as a high school counselor with students applying to a wide range of places. My fun fact is that my birth was filmed for educational purposes for nursing classes. So my mom says that I was born a star, and I keep using that line on pretty much every intro session that I've ever done. So
I love it.
it's an oldie.
I never get tired of it. I love it. You are a star in my world.
Oh, thank you.
If you've never heard of College Essay Guy, some things that we're known for are, one of the things is our Match Letter Scholarship. If you come from a low-income family, you identify as a low-income student, we offer 10 hours of free essay and application help. We'll connect you with an awesome counselor. If you already have a counselor, great. This is mostly for essay and application help. And you've got the link there, collegeessayguy.com/matchletters. If you apply by June 1st, the first matching, or actually the second matching group, happens by June 15th. So heads up on that. We'd love for you to apply. There's a little proof of income required, but please, we'd love to support you. And we have limited spots. We'll share that link in the chat. We're also known for our free stuff. We've got our YouTube channel. Smash that like button, where we put out videos once a week with all college application and admission stuff throughout the year. We have a podcast where we're at the tail end of a What Colleges Want series. So it's an epic 9-episode series where we've been walking through the state of college admissions report and all the different qualities components of the application. And, it helps you get a sense of what's most important, what's next. And you can check that out wherever fine podcasts are played. And then we've got so many counselor resources. If this, for some strange reason, is your first webinar, first of all, thank you and welcome, dear counselor. And we love you so much. We've got resources that we'll share in the chat for you and with you. We also have a one-for-one service model. So if students choose to work with us one-on-one, and for every student who works with us, we work with a student for free. And you can learn more about that on our website. But we're really proud of that. And yeah, here's what we're doing today. We're going to talk about the purpose of the personal statement. What are the awesome qualities that you need in it? What topics should you maybe avoid according to admission officers? I'm going to walk you through a couple structures that might be useful. Talk about core values, because if this wouldn't be a college essay guy webinar if I didn't at some point talk about core values. Everybody drink water, of course. And then I'm going to walk you through two awesome personal statements. I'll tell you just 2 minutes on my upcoming summer courses, which I'm really excited about. And then we'll do Q&A. All right, so what is the purpose of the personal statement? If I had to fix it in a formulated phrase, as T.S. Eliot would say, you're trying to demonstrate the skills, qualities, values, and interests you'll bring with you to a college campus. Yeah, so for those of you who are like taking notes at home, you can screenshot this or commit it to memory. Okay, skills, qualities, values, and interests. You can simplify it to that. And when you're thinking about a personal statement topic, my question will be to you, does it help demonstrate skills, qualities, values, and interests? Really, that's going to work for so many things. If you're like sitting here and then watching this and you're like, should I write about fill in the blank? I'll ask you, can you show skills, qualities, values, and interests? And if you're like, oh, I don't have a topic yet, stay tuned because we're going to brainstorm some. So what does this even mean? What are we talking about? What elements go into a great personal statement? Well, based on a review of many, many personal statements over the last 20 years, not really cringe, like I was just going to do like the emoji that's like 20 years. Here's some things that I've found to be common. Oh, there's no K period. I should fix that anyway. Here, I'll put this here so it looks like a period. We're talking about values. So values, which is to say, when we'll brainstorm these in a little bit, things that you really deeply care about, things that someone could read your essay and be like, oh, this student cares about their family, or, oh, this student cares about the environment. So values. 2, insights, which is to say, so what moments, or moments when you're revealing something that either is like expanding on something you've already shared, or in some cases, and you're revealing something that isn't somewhere else in your application. Vulnerability, and I don't mean like revealing your deepest, darkest secrets. I'm talking about, is the personal statement actually personal? And then craft. Do I clearly see that this piece of writing represents a series of considered choices? Because craft can be really complicated. I'm not saying this has to be like a perfectly beautiful poem. I just want to see that you like thought through what you're actually writing here. Some personal statement topics to potentially avoid. Now, this comes from our friends in admissions. Many admission officers are tired of reading essays on common sports, the football essay, the volleyball, the golf, etc. Right? The instrument, how I learned to play the violin, I remember the first time I played the piano, or clubs, the debate essay is pretty common. I'm not saying that you can't, okay? Just to be clear, I'm not saying that you 100% shouldn't. Or in some cases, you could weave it in, but if you choose this as your common topic, if you choose running as your topic, I think it's going to be a little harder to stand out. And so that's the qualification of what I'm saying here. So don't take this as Ethan said not to write about these things. What I'm saying is, if you write about one of these common topics, you're more likely to blend in, which is obvious maybe from the word common. Mission trips. This has become, I think, less common since COVID, but the essay where you go somewhere, usually a foreign country, you help some people with some things and you recognize, wow, I have a lot to be grateful for. So that's a pretty common one. Changing schools is a pretty common one, which is to say, my whole life changed when I moved from this school to this school. Again, not saying that you can't, it's just harder to do it really well in a way that stands out. Many students, and this is something that's coming up on a future podcast series, many students write about anxiety, depression, mental health challenges. This is something that can go in your additional information section if you feel like it's important context. If your grades were impacted, if for some reason there's something in your application that needs explaining and it was due to mental health challenges, you can put it in your additional info section. Stay tuned really soon for a blog guide that we're going to put out on this. But I wouldn't necessarily choose this as your main personal statement topic. This comes from private school admission counselors that I've spoken with recently, webinars given by public schools like the University of California. So again, not saying that you shouldn't put in your application, but not as your main personal statement topic necessarily, because you've got so much else you can write about. And if you got bad grades, again, something that you could probably explain in the education section of your application, which we're going to talk about the education section, the additional info section in our webinar next week. So that's a lot of don'ts. I don't like to do don'ts without do's. So how do you come up with some better essay ideas? Well, I've got some ideas, some prompts, or some, I should say, not prompts, but some like exercises. And we're going to go through a couple structures and then a couple exercises. So you're probably familiar with what we'll call the narrative structure, which is what most films are based on. A narrative structure is usually a cause and effect. So one thing happened, which led to this other thing, which led to this other thing. And it's usually this sort of like this led to this, led to this. And you can kind of see that in the paragraphs. And then after that, this other thing happened. And the events are often chronological, meaning they happen, you're relaying them in the order that they happened. So when I was young, I did this, and then I did this other thing. And then I think this can be useful, and I'll give you an example in a little bit, if you're writing about a challenge that you've overcome. Okay. And that's what many students will be mostly familiar with, you know. But what I want to share with you today, if you've never heard this structure, is something called the montage structure. And in this case, it's a thematic connection. So you're finding a topic. It could be, you know, something that you, a place where you find yourself at home in your zone. Or it could be something that you just geek out on, maybe something you know a lot about. And you're connecting that thing, whatever it is, to lots of different sides of you. And this doesn't have to be necessarily told chronologically. So let's say you're writing, for example, like I love board games. I use this as an example a lot. But I don't need to necessarily be like, the first board game I played was this. The second board game I played was this. I don't need to do it chronological. I can be like, board games are awesome, and they've helped shape me in bunches of ways. Let me tell you how. And then I talk to you about how board games have shaped my interests, skills, qualities, values, etc. And so it gives you lots of freedom to jump around. And I think this is really useful, especially for those of you who are listening and who are like, gosh, I don't have a challenge to write about. I don't have that big thing that's like, you know, totally changed my life. Many students don't, or in some cases don't want to write about it, which is why I want to focus for most of this webinar on this montage structure. And by the way, neither one of these is like better. It's not better to write about a challenge. Okay, just so that that's clear. So montage structure, what is it? If you remember this, the scene, the montage at the start of Up, it's a way to basically cover a lot of ground, a lot of space and time in a short period of time. Now, in a movie, that's time in terms of a couple minutes. In your personal statement, it's covering a lot of information in just a few words. And for the personal statement, in case you're curious, it's probably going to be somewhere between 500 to 650 words, depending on which application you use. But for most schools, when they're writing about a person, when they're talking about a personal statement, they're talking about the personal statement that's going to be for something that you'll submit through their application. Usually it's the Common App, but different schools have different applications. I can answer questions about that later. But when you're trying to find your topic, you can consider this montage, which is to say, or how do a few images help tell larger sides of who you are? Or how do those few images, you know, help hint at skills, qualities, values, interests? And in order to find, you find the images. Well, actually, you can do it either way. You can find the images first. So you can be like brainstorming, hey, I want to talk about all these different sides of me. And then you can think about, okay, what connects all these different sides of me? Or you can flip it. You can think, okay, what's a theme, something that I could say a lot about? And then what are some different sides of myself that I want to show? And the purpose, and I'll show you a metaphor for that in just a second. The purpose of a montage essay is, again, skills, qualities, values, and interests you'll bring to a college campus. And you're doing this because you can't talk about every single aspect of your life. So let me show you this. I'm talking about this metaphor. A thread is sort of like the connective theme. And the beads here, these little red things, are basically the different skills, qualities, values, and interests that you want to show. So in order to make a great montage personal statement work, we need the beads, the different sides of yourself you want to show, and we need this thread, the connective theme that's going to connect them. The connective thing that's going to connect them. Yeah, I said it. All right, let's look at an example. So pause for water. This was written by a student who took my course most recently this past year. And the theme that the student chose was escape rooms, because she knew a lot about them based on her growing up. And this is not, by the way, the be all end all, like perfect essay that you have to write your essay like this. There are so many different ways of doing this montage structure, but I think it's a really nice example. And the student got accepted into selective schools. So for those of you who are like, you know, does this work, quote unquote? Yes, it works in the sense of getting into other schools, getting into like a large range of selective schools. But I'll also say this. I think what defines success in terms of a personal statement are two things, and I've already named them. One is, did the student show skills, qualities, values, and interests? And two, does the student do These things at the top. Do they demonstrate values, insight, vulnerability, and craft? So as I'm reading this, I want you to look for, and it's hard to hold all, whatever, 8 of those things in your head, but I want you to at least look for, do you spot values? That's maybe a good place to start. Here's the essay. The United States is under attack. My eyes widen, listening to the words coming from the speaker. The nuclear missile program has been compromised, and you're now locked in the presidential bunker, moments away from war. That doesn't sound too good. You have 60 minutes to disarm the missiles. Good luck. The fate of the world is in my hands. Now, pause for a second. What I love about this and what makes this essay opening a hook, I would define a hook as something that raises a question in our minds or several questions. And there are several questions that are raised in my mind as I'm reading this. First of all, wait, what's happening? Is there actually an attack? Who is this person responding? And like, who is the voice? And then who's the person? Who's the authorial, the author voice? So there are all these questions in my head. And is the fate of the world truly in this person's hands? And in the next sentence, it answers, the fate of the world isn't actually in the hands of a 17-year-old girl, I hope. This is just the name of the game when it comes to escape rooms. Now, here's the topic named for the first time in the second paragraph, second sentence, second paragraph, which is nice early on. So it kind of sets me at ease. Okay, that's what we were talking about. I first suggested that my family attempt one when we started encountering communication issues. There's a little bit of the why. Like, how did you get into this? And why is it potentially important to you? Now they're the tradition that brings us closer, allowing us to learn more about each other in a mind-bending way. However, the lessons I've taken away from escape rooms extend much further than this. Now, I love this opening because what the author has done is they've answered like 1 or 2 of the questions, which is like, okay, it's not actually the fate of the world is in your hands, and the voice was coming from an escape room. Great. But now the author is raising another question, which is going to carry us until the end of the story. What I mean by this, and this is like a technique from screenwriting, oftentimes the hook, it's like, is he going to escape from the bad guys at the beginning of the movie? Like, who even is, or why are they chasing him? That gets answered. But then there's this larger question that gets launched, and it's the question of the movie, or in this case, it's the question of the story, the question of the personal statement. What are the lessons that this student, this author, has learned from escape rooms? The instant the timer starts ticking downwards, my eyes dart left and right. 60, 59, 59. Any of the various items meticulously placed around the treehouse's setting could serve as a vital puzzle piece. My analytical mind not only helps plan my getaway in an escape room, but also enables me to look after my community. Okay, values alert. Now, first of all, what the student's doing here is really nice. There's not so much time spent on the topic, quote unquote. And I'm saying topic because even though this essay is ostensibly about escape rooms, there's only, if you look, it's only like the first couple sentences here of the paragraph that are devoted to escape rooms. The student does a smart thing and transitions away from escape rooms to talking about a value, in this case, community. So notice so this is a quick tip. If you're going to use this technique, spend just a little bit of time on the topic and get into the real topic, which is your skills, qualities, values, and interests. You are the real topic. Living in Chicago's South Side, but attending a school near downtown, let me witness firsthand the disparities regarding funding and profitability between startups created by minorities in my predominantly African-American community and non-minorities in the financial district. This observation prompted me to develop an entrepreneurship program that introduces Black girls to resources needed to create their own businesses. Being Black is a substantial part of my identity, so it's important for me to see others of a similar complexion in a position to make a difference. I strive to make others feel represented, and my ability to analyze situations to create opportunities allows me to do this. Okay, some things that I really love here. First of all, again, there's this clear value where the student is talking about community, and the student's talking about one aspect of the student's identity that's really important. In this case, being Black, and why that's meaningful to her. So there's already connecting it to values and identities, and it's taking escape rooms, and it's really not making it about escape rooms. It's about, here's how escape rooms allows me to talk about these different sides of myself. Next paragraph, the door to a second room pops open. Okay, good. We're returning to the theme, which kind of keeps us organized and be like, right, escape rooms. 3628, 3627. So it's building the tension here. Escape rooms spark a sense of curiosity, new value that I couldn't imagine gaining elsewhere. Upon entering the Wizard of Oz, I'm left wondering how the trees placed before me are programmed to blink in Morse code. This curiosity, repeated just so that it's clear that this is what the paragraph's about, extends into other aspects of my life, leading me to question, for example, how Bernoulli's principle permits objects to levitate through air currents despite seemingly unbalanced forces, or what the greatest possible length for a straw is. After dragging a tube-like model up 3 flights of stairs, I can confidently say 32 feet. Love the sense of humor there. That's another value in this, another quality that shows the student's personality. The creative facet of escape rooms also triggers my innovative spirit. Okay, new value. First of all, I love the specifics in here that demonstrate the student's curiosity. So you see these details in here talking about Bernoulli's principle and air currents. And then here's a new quality, my innovative spirit. Though time-consuming, I enjoy scouring leftover craft supplies to find popsicle sticks for my latest Rube Goldberg machine because it allows me to experiment with creating systems to solve everyday tasks. So now we're getting a combo of like curiosity, but also the curiosity that inspires a student to actually do stuff and try stuff. By letting my thoughts run wild and engaging in clever endeavors, I gain a feeling of satisfaction knowing that someday the product of my doing will impact a project expanding beyond myself. And there's a nice so what. So this is a nice example of an insight where the student is going to the end of the paragraph and going, okay, what does this reveal about me? So in this case, I gain a feeling of satisfaction. How? Knowing that someday the product of my doing will impact a project expanding beyond myself. And this student is hinting at what she's going to do in the future, which stay tuned, she'll reveal. But it's not so much being like, and this is what I want to do when I grow up. It's still keeping the escape room kind of, fun, playfulness. I don't always escape the rooms in time. The museum heist is an example. Ultimately, the challenge of squirming through vents and deactivating lasers triumphed over me. Yet, I left grateful knowing I'd be better prepared for our next puzzle. And I've worked hard to not let other setbacks deter me. Do you see the quality here? The quality here is something like, I don't know, perseverance. Yet the student doesn't say like, I persevere. It's showing it through details. The essay is showing it through details. I was crushed after finding out I didn't advance to nationals in my freshman year of Business Professionals of America. But after tweaking my presentation with the feedback provided, I emerged stronger the following year, earning 2nd place. Nice contextualization of this activity. But notice this isn't a straight brag, and it doesn't feel like a straight brag. How? Why? Because the student is focusing on a particular value, and the value is what's foregrounded in this particular paragraph. So the value here is like, getting up when after setbacks and like trying again. And this here is given as an example of that. So it's not like, hey, I got 2nd place in this thing, right? Which could just kind of float out there kind of awkwardly like an achievement drop, like kind of like a name drop. But if you focus on the value at the top, and that's the main focus here, then when you give the example, it's like, oh, cool, great, thanks for the specifics. And oh, I like knowing that that's what that 2nd place meant to you. I approach every situation eager to participate, willing to fail, and determined to grow. Notice all the values here. I want this person on my campus when I read this because each experience enables me to seek improved solutions moving forward. And that's the kind of insight, the kind of so what, that tells me that the student is a reflective, critical thinker. So what? Final sentence. I've learned that success comes with roadblocks, but outcomes are even more satisfying with a story to tell. Now, I slowed down there because there's kind of a little surprise moment where you don't quite expect the reader to say, or the author to say that. I say this because it could have read something like, I've learned that success comes with roadblocks, but it's important to persevere no matter what, which would feel like, okay, you could see that on a Hallmark card. But instead, there's kind of a little shift here, and the student focuses on, hey, it's nice to have a great story to tell. So you get the sense of sort of like, I don't know, ease or like awareness of the meta as you see the student's perspective on this. Here's the ending. I'm ready to enter the next stage of my life as an engineer. You notice that now it's the mention of the future career with the insights that escape rooms have given me. Maybe I'm prepared to have the fate of the world in my hands after all. So there's so much that I love about this essay. I'll just recap the tips. I was gonna like say them to you and then show you this, but let me just throw them up on screen. So if you're considering writing your own personal statement, and given that you're here, I'm going to guess that's true, I want to encourage you to consider brainstorming an uncommon topic. And I should say more uncommon topic, because it's not necessarily true that it's a binary and there are uncommon and common topics. I mean, I guess you could argue that, and we could make 2 buckets here, but I want you to think of this more on a spectrum where there are topics that are very common, like football, and there are topics that are very uncommon, like beekeeping. Now, you don't have to write about something as uncommon as beekeeping in order to stand out, but you can kind of probably internally assess, okay, is the thing that I'm considering writing about going to be more common or more uncommon? Like, how many people out of 100 could I imagine are going to be writing about this? And if I were to imagine escape rooms, probably safe to say fewer than 5 people are going to be writing about escape rooms. And one of the keys in this process, if you're trying to stand out, is to think about, can I choose a frame that might be a little bit more interesting for the reader, something that maybe they haven't encountered before? I also want to encourage you to raise a question at the start, which is to say, even though you're not writing necessarily a challenges-based essay, you can still hook the reader by making them wonder what's happening here at the start in a light way, in a way that keeps them kind of interested, kind of wakes them up a little bit. I also want to encourage you to connect to the values, and we're going to get into brainstorming some of yours in just a minute. And I want you to not connect the values only to the topic itself. So if this were an essay all about escape rooms and I learned a whole lot about escape rooms, that's only going to be just so useful when it comes to the main purpose of this, which is like, again, your skills, qualities, values, and interests. So shift away from the topic, which is to say, whatever it is, running, debate, if it's common, right? And shift more towards what is the thing that you want to say about yourself. Again, illustrate values with specific examples. So notice the author doesn't just say, I'm a very curious person, but instead the author gets into like, how Bernoulli's principle permits objects to levitate through air currents despite seemingly unbalanced forces. That's a great specific example of how that value manifests in the student's life. It's also an example of what I call geeky language, which is to say, a little bit of jargon that lets the reader know that you know your stuff, that you've really spent some time thinking about this. And then I want to encourage you to ask yourself, so what, throughout this process, but especially in your personal statement. I love them at the ends of paragraphs. Include some of those insights, those so what moments. I think that's really key when it comes to, landing. I think it was like sort of landing your essay, but you're kind of landing what is it called? Landing the jump in the Olympics. And I think you're kind of doing that at the end of each paragraph. Okay. So let's take a few minutes here. And I want to actually, because we're right at the midway point, I want to help you brainstorm your own topic. And I'm going to give you 2 exercises. These are two that I really like. There are more that I won't have time to get into today. But I want to walk you through 2 simple, we're going to take like a minute and a half for each of these. And so what you'll need for this is you'll need somewhere to write. So you can open up a Google Doc or Microsoft Word doc, or you can even pull out your phone, but try not to get distracted by text and other things. And I want you to just take a minute and a half with me and do each of these exercises. All right. Because guess what? It could be that you actually find a personal statement topic right here in 3 minutes, maybe. So the first exercise, actually, we're going to do 2. We're going to do 3 total exercises. The first one is I want you to spend a minute, and I'm going to show you what this looks like, making a list of things that you love. So I'll do 30 seconds. I love teaching. I love trying to find patterns in things. I love cold water. I love when technology works. I love connecting. I love like deep conversations that go way into the night. I love deep breaths. I love meditation. I love when my daughter makes up songs in the car. I love playing Name That Tune, like Spotify version where I play songs from my friends from the 90s and they try and guess the songs, etc. Okay. So that's 30 seconds, but I'm going to give you 90 seconds. And I want you to not think about this too much. I want you to just make a list of random things that you love. And I'll tell you what this has to do with college essays in a few minutes. Okay. Don't think about this too much. If you're with somebody, you could do this aloud and have them type, or maybe you both do it. If you're like a parent, both of you do this. All right. Make a list of things that you love for 90 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. If you're just joining us, hi, welcome. We're making a list of things that we love for 51 more seconds. Thumbs up. All right. So, part two. Next, I want you to make a list of things that you know a lot about, aka things that you could geek out on, aka if you were at a party or a social gathering and someone came up to you and was like, I'm into such and such, and you're like, oh, we should talk. Like, what are those things that you're a nerd for? 90 seconds. So, like, for example, I'm a nerd for college essays. I'm a nerd for self-help nonfiction books. I'm a nerd for productivity tips. I'm a nerd for etc. Okay, you do yours. 90 seconds. Again, we're just going to go straight through with silence. What are the things that you know a lot about? Three, two, one, go. All right. Thumbs up. All right. We're going to do the other exercise and then I'm going to explain what's the what with these. All right. So this exercise is making a list, also for a minute and a half, of all the different ways that you identify. And I want you to see if you can come up with at least five. So one way to do this is to think about different communities that you're a part of. So for example, I'm here in Sacramento for a college admission counselors conference that I'm presenting at. So I would consider myself a member of the college admission community. So one way to identify is as a counselor, college admission counselor. Another way that I identify is an oldest sibling. I'm the oldest of five. I also identify as a basketball player, an athlete, a former athlete, I should say. I identify as a Thai food lover. So you could look to your I know and I love list to see, well, which ways would you step forward and be like, oh, I identify as that. I identify as a North Carolinian because I was born in North Carolina, etc. So I want you to spend, again, a minute and a half, and I've started the timer already. See if you can list as many identities as you can think of. You can think about somewhere that you live, urban, rural, suburban. Action things you do. What are some things that you love to do? What ways that do you identify based on that? Are you a gamer? Are you a social justice advocate? Interest? What are the things that you like? Chocolate lovers. I am a chocolate lover. That is one of my identities. Circumstance. Circumstance could mean the way that you were born. So I was male assigned at birth. So I identify as a man. I also have a daughter. So I identify as a dad. I'm also married. So I identify as a husband. What are your identities? Okay. So each of these exercises could well turn into your personal statement topic. In fact, the student whose essay that we looked at, the escape rooms, came from, I don't know if this was an I love or I know, but I led her through these exercises and she hit on escape rooms as something that she could talk on and on about. So it could be that you focus on one thing that you love, like escape rooms, or one thing that you know a lot about, like programming or like constructed languages. Or it could be that you focus on a singular identity. So one student in the past that I worked with focused on their identity as an introvert and how that identity led them to develop skills, qualities, values, and interests. Or it could be that your personal statement topic ends up focusing on several different things that you love, or several things that you know a lot about, or several identities. So for some of you counselors who were on this webinar last year, there was a different student whose essay was all about different identities and how each identity revealed different values. Either one of these approaches can work. What you need is some kind of connective theme or thread. So if you do use identities, plural, you're going to want to have something at the start of your essay that's like, my different identities have helped shape who I am, broadly speaking. And so the theme is like my different identities, right? That's the topic. If you'd use different things that you love and know a lot about, you're going to need something to be like, you could say some different things that I love connect to who I am, but that might be a little bit broad. And in this case, I think it can be a little bit more interesting, a little more likely to stand out if you choose one thing you love or one thing you know. Okay. How do you then take this idea and start to build paragraphs? Well, I believe it's about connecting to a few of your core values. So what do I mean by this? There's an exercise, you can Google it, it's values exercise, college essay guy, that involves looking at this list and asking yourself, what are some different values that I could connect my topic to? So just for the sake of brainstorming here, let's do 2 minutes. Actually, let's stick with a minute and a half thing. I'm kind of liking it. What are some different, pick something that you love or know a lot about. Could be anything that you've written down. So if someone mentioned seashells, for example, in the Q&A, great, take seashells. You don't need to literally take seashells, and definitely don't take them from the beach. But what are some different qualities that you could connect to insert your topic? So for example, if I were to take games, I could connect games, board games, to family. I could connect it to travel, because I've traveled a lot and played different games all over the world. I could connect it to productivity. I definitely turn my being productive into a game. Okay, so let's just do a minute and a half brainstorm. Take a topic, something that you've either an identity that you could write a lot about, that you could say a lot about, or something that you love or know a lot about, and see if you can connect it to, like, let's say 3 to 5 values just right now. Mini brainstorm. So another example, escape rooms. What are some values that it connects to? Community, curiosity, helping others. Those are values that were revealed in the escape rooms essay. Social change, perseverance. And if you're not coming up with a lot of ideas with this one topic, switch to another one. What's something else that you could say a lot about that would show different sides of you? All right, time's up. All right. So what you've got here is sort of the beginnings of what could potentially become a montage essay if you found an uncommon topic. And if you haven't, don't worry. There are other exercises, and give yourself time. You've only spent 40 minutes on this so far. But again, the montage essay can essentially show different skills, qualities, values, and interests, and that's sort of its main purpose. But it's not the only structure that can work for your personal statement. So the other structure, and we don't have as much time to talk about this one because I want to make sure we've got time for Q&A, but it's what I would call the narrative structure. And for those of you who face challenges, and, have worked through them. You could use this structure, which broadly speaking would involve describing in the first third of your essay, what is the challenge that you experienced and how did it impact you? So what were its effects? So that's maybe 200, 250 words. And then describing what you did about it. That's really important for challenges-based essays. And then in the end, talking about what you learned. So what are the insights that you gained from that experience? And I like this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 structure as a sort of, oftentimes as a sort of like a good approximate word budget. One thing that students will do often is they'll write about a challenge and effect, and they'll make the whole essay that. And then at the end, they're like, but I'm trying. And that's okay for the first draft. But if you do end up writing about a challenge, I want to encourage you to like squish the challenge and the effects up into the first third so that you've got room enough to write about what you did about it and what you learned. And that can take some time. It can take several drafts to really get to what you did about it and what you learned. There's an exercise, you can Google this, feelings and needs exercise. And it involves 6 questions that you can walk through. And essentially, I ask 6 questions in this video. It'll take you about 15, 20 minutes. We don't have time to do it today. But you can sort of map out a potential personal statement just by answering these 6 questions. And I've sort of mentioned the first 2. What were the challenges or the challenges you experienced? How did it impact you? In particular, the external circumstances of your life. How did you feel about it? And what needs either were or in most cases weren't getting met? And then what did you do to meet those needs? So this is from Nonviolent Communication. If any of you have heard of it, it's an awesome book, by the way, totally recommend it. Love the audiobook. But when you start to think about the feelings and needs underlying your experiences, that can sometimes help us contextualize and help us understand why we've done the things that we've done. Yeah, there's more there, but we don't have time to talk about it today. But essentially, people are like, this is like the 20-minute therapy exercise. And I'm like, and then finally, based on what you did, what are the skills? What are the lessons? What did you gain from the experience? So I know I'm going fast over this, but I want to make sure we get time for Q&A. This feelings and needs list is, if you Google feelings and needs exercise, you'll find this. We don't have time to go over this essay in depth right now, but I want to talk broadly about how this essay works. Actually, you know what? Let me just summarize it by going to the analysis. So this is a student who experienced many challenges, which you'll see listed on the screen here. You can also, if you want, you can Google this essay. If you type in what had to be done, college essay guy, you'll find it. But you'll see that the student experienced many challenges. And he talks in the essay about the impacts. His mother had to work more, he had to take care of his little brother, his grades were impacted. When he was brainstorming, this is a student that I worked with years ago, an undocumented student who ended up at Stanford and graduated from grad school, which was awesome. He talks in the essay about what he did about it to sort of meet some of the needs that he listed. And then he talks about what he learned in the experience and what he was hoping for in the future. So again, I know I'm going over this kind of fast, but the broad strokes detail, like the structure of this essay, in the start, he talks about the challenges that he experienced in terms of, domestic abuse, impacts, if you look at the second paragraph, on his life, essentially money being tight, mom working 2 jobs. And there were more challenges that he experienced. He had a younger brother. He had to take care of him, more effects. And then you'll notice in the next part of the essay, he grows determined to improve the quality of his life for his family and himself. He starts becoming his own teacher, finding a job to help pay bills, working on getting his grades back. In the end, later, he starts to be inspired to help others, becoming involved in school, in his community, and finally becoming proud of that. And that was a lot for him to say that he was proud of this. Got the soundtrack in the background. Ultimately, the thing that he says is he wants to be able to make choices and do things, not because I have to, he says, but because I choose to. And this is a really important connection to his core value. So his main number 1 value when we did the values exercise was autonomy. Autonomy meaning being self-governing. Auto meaning self, right? So he spent so much of his life early on doing things because it's what had to be done. He kind of says that at the end of the first paragraph, and then he says that again at the end of the third paragraph. We did what we had to do. But he gets to this place where he's like, I want to be able to do it, not because I have to, but because I choose to. Which was it was really cool that it came back to his main number 1 core value. Okay. Again, you can Google this, what had to be done. It's in there. And we're coming to also almost Q&A. I want to remind you all that next week I'm going to zoom back from the personal statement to talk about what are the other elements of your application. And I'm going to give you some tips for each of those. Tom's going to do more of the talking there, and I'll jump into the chat. But just to kind of recap in terms of what we've talked about so far, you don't have to maybe write your essay based on a big challenge, as we saw in the last example. You could do a narrative, which is what we just talked about, but you could also use this montage structure. Again, I want you to, hopefully in this session, you're sort of zooming back and getting a broader sense of other potential essay topics. In terms of what's common or uncommon, that's something you could ask your counselor about. You can ask me on the course if you want, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. But that's something to like get input on. Is like, is this a topic that you've seen? But I want to encourage you to sort of think outside the box in terms of, and not maybe go with the first thing that you think of. Some of the things that we'll talk about next week, we're going to talk about great supplemental essays. So the supplemental essays are essays that you'll need to write if you're applying to selective schools that are not the personal statement. I'll talk to you about the activities list, the additional info. And then if you're interested in seeing the rest of the application written by this particular student, we're going to kind of zoom back and I'm going to share with you the rest of it. Quick notes on the two courses that are coming up that I'm so excited to tell you all about. So the first course that I'm teaching, and the course is starting in like 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks. It's on writing a personal statement. And the live sessions for this year run June 18th to July 9th. And it's kind of a flipped classroom model where I'm going to give you homework each week that you'll do. And then you'll come to a live session like this and I'll answer your questions. We'll play a game called, is this a good topic or not? And you'll be like, is this a good topic? And I'll like give you tips on your topic. It's got lots and lots of sample essays. And this is going to work for probably most of the private schools, especially that you're applying to. Just to give you a sense of what's happening each week. Week 1, we've got brainstorming, which is like, coming up with awesome topics. I'm going to give you some more exercises for this. I'm also going to walk you through in part 2, how do you go from this cool idea to actually start building those paragraphs more fully with lots of examples. We get into revising, which is like, how do you figure out the middle of your essay when you're trying to think about all the stuff you did to overcome the challenge? I've got a whole bunch of questions on that. And then refining, how do you up-level your essay? How do you know when the essay's done? The main thing that I do, the curriculum that I use, pausing for sirens. There we go. The main curriculum I use is this Choose Your Own Adventure tool, which basically has tons and tons of essay examples, lots and lots, as you can see here. I've also got a table of contents page that basically walks you through each of these paths. And it gives you tips on like how to bring more insight into your essay, and how to write great transition sentences, and what are some tips for getting feedback when you're writing your essay. And the good news is that you can do it live, or if you want, you can just do it asynchronously. So you don't need to show up for the live sessions. You can just kind of work alongside us. And there are 2 sessions. There's like a 10 a.m. Pacific session, and there's a 4 p.m. Pacific session. So that's 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern. And then what else do I want you to know? I think that's, we'll share the link in the chat so you can learn more about that. And then that segues into part 2. And part 2, and you'll get a preview next week, is zooming back to look at your entire application. So how do you make sure that you aren't just focused on your personal statement, but that you're zooming back to think about the other elements of your applications? They work together. So what goes into a great activities list? Additional info section, why us essay, which is the why do you want to attend a particular school? How do you research those? We're going to get into extracurricular and supplemental essays. And then how do you zoom back and make sure that the application is quote unquote doing its job, and what that even is? And again, sessions are 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Pacific, so 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern. And they run basically right after that. So my hope is that by the end of this course, these courses, by the end of the summer, you'll have completed really solid drafts of, let's say if you're applying to early schools, your early school. So if you're working through the Common App, you'll probably have completed the Common App if you follow along. I also have opportunities for students to submit essays for being, reviewed live on the session. I can't review everybody's, but I do get a chance to get to a lot of the essays in a lot of these sessions, which is kind of cool. So you get to see other students working through it. It creates a really cool community vibe where you kind of feel like you're in it with other students as you're working through it. Get this, if you're watching this webinar right now, the first 50 people who sign up for part 1 of the course, and we'll share the link again in the chat, you'll get 20% off if you use the code FIRST50, FIRST50. And you can see that link in the chat. And that's just for the first 50 folks who do it. And you'll get 50% off of part 2. So that's the application and supplemental essays one. So if that's interesting, you can race and go do that right now if you like. So I'll pause for a second if folks want to do that. And with that, let me whoops, throw my slideshow up again. We'll connect to the Q&A page. So, also, if you, for some reason, you don't like the courses, there's no real risk because you can get a refund within 30 days. We have pay what you can spots. So if if that's appealing to you, if you're like, if you identify as a low-income student, there's a little proof of income thing, and you can get a pay what you can spot. You can get that through the form. Let me show you where that is real quick. So if you're on the course page, sometimes people are like, where's the pay what you can spot? So you go to this and you go to pay what you can. There we go. If you go here, there it is. There's the pay what you can spot. So you can just fill out this application by clicking this link right here. We really want to make this accessible for y'all. All right. Stopping sharing. Tom, how are we doing in the Q&A? How's it going over there?
I've been working as fast as I can. There's still a lot that have left to be answered, but I've done 73 and there's 43 that are open. So you're welcome. Something that's coming up a lot that I just want to spend a little bit of time, I don't know if I would call it debunking, but just reframing maybe, is a lot of people are basically doing kind of what you alluded to as part of the course of like, how common is my topic submissions. It's very difficult to give an opinion on that without reading the essay or like the brainstorming around how that's coming to take shape. And I would also say that as someone who worked in admissions, right, no part of my job was assessing the level of commonness of a student's essay. That's not a part of an admissions rubric. That's not how people in admissions make decisions. You don't get points for having a more uncommon or eclectic or different topic. What you do is you grab the reader's attention and you avoid yourself from falling into a story that feels really familiar. That's the way I describe it. So like, for example, some of you are asking like, how common is a topic about immigrating to a new country or moving around a lot, or how my community has shaped me? And the answer is objectively, yes, many students have written topics about that. Do I think they're good topics to write about? Absolutely, because they're very influential to who you are. And the key is to write kind of like, I would hope that the sample essays, I think, did a really good job of like underscoring the value of specificity, because that's really the key with some of these common topics, right? Is what are the, like with the what had to be done essay, the toothpaste, the toothbrush, those kind of specific moments and references that are very unique to Fernando, the student. So that is, I'd say, those are things to think about if you are going to be writing about a topic that is objectively more common or a lot of students have written about. But I just want you to know that having a topic that's completely avant-garde and unconventional, no one's ever written about, can be not a great essay. You might not be including anything about your core values, about the skills that you're bringing to a college community. The person at admissions can't really say much other than, oh, they wrote a really cool essay about wiring work that they do. But if you're not kind of including kind of like the so what insights of it, you didn't really do your job. Even though you got a lot of points in the uncommonness end of the spectrum, that's not really what someone in admissions is using to make a case for you when they're advocating for why you should be admitted to the school. So that's just something that I notice a lot of paralyzing fear, I would say, around like, oh, if I pick a cliche topic, my application is going to be thrown out the window. Kids are admitted to amazing, highly selective schools every single year writing about common topics. The key is to try and avoid boredom and falling by the wayside by folding in some specific distinctive elements, which our courses and guides really help you do.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Thanks for threading some of that. This is, it's meant to sort of inspire and get you thinking in a different direction, but also, what Tom said. Let's see, I'm going to grab some of these randomly. So would you select to talk about extracurricular activities as it applies to values, insights, vulnerabilities? Yes. I think, I don't think it's a bad idea to weave in your extracurricular activities. I just think it's important to do it in the context of what is the value that you want to focus on or the skill. And after that, what are some insights that you want to talk about? Someone asks, what would writing about my relationship to nature be a good topic? Maybe, but you'd want to get really specific about what it is about, is there a particular, can you take nature and like get down to like a particular aspect of it? So one student, for example, that I worked with a few years ago wrote about plants, and plants had helped her develop a series of skills and values that, lo and behold, helped her realize that she was interested in studying business. And so that's called what I call a Venn diagram essay, where it's like, I love plants and I love business. Where do they overlap? What are the values that they have in common? And that can create for a really interesting, surprising ending. You don't have to write about your career at the end, but you could. The student whose essay we looked at, the escape rooms essay, mentions engineering briefly because she wanted to save more of the why I want to study engineering for her supplemental essays, which we'll look at next week. Someone asked, are the prompts available for 2024? Yes, if you just search Common App prompts. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with the prompts as a brainstorming because I don't think it's the best way to come up with interesting ideas. I think that these exercises are a little bit better, but you also have a topic of your choice where you can basically write about whatever you want.
Yeah. And just one real quick, like in the weeds kind of technicality point is the Common App prompts for the personal statement they say pretty much the same from year to year. There's really not a lot of variance there. And even if you look at all the topics, pretty much basically anything about yourself counts, and there's always topic of your choice. School specific supplemental essays are released on August 1st. So if you're planning on writing an essay to Stanford or Duke or whatever the college that you may be deciding to apply to may be, just know that I would caution you against going too far along with trying to write those essays now, because the schools change their prompts from year to year sometimes. So you want to wait until after August 1st before I'd say diving into those more college specific supplemental essays.
Yeah, great clarification. Oliver asked, I can see similarities between having a long-term challenge and a theme for an essay. Can you combine narrative and montage? You absolutely can, Oliver. I don't have time to explain it, how to do that exactly right now, but the big strokes version of it is you want to kind of decide, is the essay primarily a narrative, which starts with a challenge at the start and then gets montagey in the middle? Or is this an essay that's like montage, like escape rooms, and gets a challenge in the middle and then comes back to that montage theme? Someone else asks, let's see. Oh, about working with us one-on-one. Yeah. So how do you find out? Yeah. If you're interested in working with us one-on-one, if you fill out that info form and do the 30-minute consultation, yes, that is free. That was the main question. Yes.
There's a couple of questions. If I could just take a minute to address
Please.
them, because there's a few people asked around this theme.
Yeah,
A
great.
couple of people asked if, say, for example, I'm a religious person and I want to write an essay about my faith, but I'm worried that the person reading it isn't religious or has biases against that or anything like that. What I would say on that point is we definitely do have there definitely are certain topics, like, for example, we have a video on writing about mental health in your college application. That's just something that in the current landscape, there is a nuance to that I would say you want to be mindful of. But around topics like, for example, politics, religion, like typical things that like at the Thanksgiving dinner table or, can be tumultuous, or there can be friction when you bring it up with people in everyday life. I would say from my experience, you should not feel like you should be silenced around things like that in your application. So I worked at a very non-religious school, Pomona College. We have many students who wrote about their Christian, Muslim, Jewish faith in their applications. We had an interfaith clubs and resources, and we had an interfaith community at the college, even if the school on its own was pretty a-religious. Most of the students did not really strongly identify with the religious background, but it was bringing in perspectives to our campus that we thought were valuable. And it was great to hear about students finding certain values and coming closer to certain parts of who they are through their journeys, through their faith. Same thing with politics, right? So that's just something that I would say the person in admissions isn't going to throw out your app because they don't personally agree with your views necessarily. So for me, I'm not very non-athletic. Like my sister was like the star athlete in the family. My dad was the football coach in my high school. I was not. So I have my own like personal beef with like not feeling like a good athlete and my own baggage with that anytime an essay came up around, I'm like, oh, like great. But it doesn't mean that I was not admitting athletic students. When you work at a college, you don't make a case for students based on like the topic of their personal statement necessarily. It's more about the overall so what's that they're communicating, and the mode through which that happens, whether it's politics or sports or whatever, isn't something that you're being evaluated or judged on. So I hope that helps.
That's great clarification. I'm going to do some rapid fire. I'm going to do a few in a row. Izzy asks, is it unwise to start your hook with a quote from a book or movie? I would say lean away from that. I would love for you to start with your words rather than a quote, especially a popular quote. If it's a really obscure quote, maybe you could do it in a fun way. Someone asked, is it a good topic I play chess and challenge I face in tournaments? If you are going to write about chess, I would encourage you to steer away from the tournaments because that would get you focused more on chess and think more about the skills, qualities, values you've gained from chess and how those have manifested in your life. So imagine that your essay is like 20% about chess and 80% about your skills, qualities, values, interests. What do you mean about college specific essay prompts? Do colleges give you the prompts they want to hear about? Yeah, we're going to talk about that in our next session on the 4th, and you'll get a reminder of this, but different colleges have different prompts that they're interested in. Not all colleges, but for example, what you write for Michigan might be different from what you write for, Boston University. And those are released usually on August 1st. And then someone's asking about the UC personal insight questions. That's a whole separate webinar and it's a whole separate course. But we'll talk more about that later in the year. But if you want to see, if you Google UC personal insight questions, college essay guy, you'll see, and I think Tom answered this, but you'll see that there's like a whole set of different rules and what they're looking for that we won't have time to focus on today. Tom, over to you for any, final ones here, any final questions you see, or just final thoughts before we close for today, and then we'll connect with you all next week. As you see one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I definitely encourage a lot of you who are tuning in to come to the next session that we have, because I think a lot of things that you're touching on in the Q&A and like wondering about like where's the best place to put what, I think we'll kind of give you more of an overview of the different opportunities through your entire college application to share more information with people in admissions. There's usually not, our answer is not like, oh, this place is 100% objectively the better place to do it, because it really depends on the individual student, what you're trying to share. But we will definitely give recommendations of like, what is most appropriate for an additional information section. A lot of things that many of you were mentioning, I would actually argue are a great things to include in something like the additional information section, like moving around a lot or grades or stumbles or health challenges. But it doesn't mean that you also can't talk about those in your personal statement as well. So I think, next week's session will kind of cover a lot of maybe points of fogginess or ambiguity that you may have right now.
Lovely. Well, I can't see, but I imagine we have a few spots left for the discount for the course, but would love to have some of you all join us. And again, there's no real risk because if you don't like it, you can just get your money back. And we also have those pay what you can spots. So we'd love to have you join us. And we're excited to see you all next week where we'll share more about the other parts of the application. Much love. Let's see if Zoom will do it. If I do the heart thing, will it do the heart thing? There it is. Yes. And we'll see y'all next week. Bye. Thanks, Tom.